Welcome to Mr. Strawman. Are you ready to hear stories not just about bad dates, but really creepy ones? The man who picked me up for dinner wasn't exactly human. I've always been more of a homebody than a social butterfly. Spending time with my pet snake, Basil, was far more appealing than being around people. I'd never had a boyfriend or even been on a real date. My life revolved around school, work, and planning for the future. There was simply no time for romance. After graduating and landing my first real job, Grace wouldn't stop nudging me about meeting someone. No excuses seemed convincing enough, so she signed me up on a dating site herself and took on the role of matchmaker. I wasn't interested in most of the profiles she showed me until she pointed out Samael. Samael was breathtaking. I hesitate to admit it, but he was the archetype of tall, dark, and handsome. His profile stated that he worked in international relations and spoke multiple languages. After Grace's persistent encouragement, I finally accepted an invitation to dinner with him. As the evening approached, nerves I didn't expect took over. I called Grace for guidance. Order something a little fancy, have some wine, but don't overdo it. And for heaven's sake, don't start talking about Basil, she said firmly. Her advice didn't calm me much. I paced my apartment, smoothing my blouse over and over, until a knock at the door startled me. "You must be Samael," I said with a tentative smile. "1 second, I just need to grab my coat." He lingered at the threshold, not stepping fully inside. His eyes flicked over the doorway in a way that made my skin prickle, almost like he was measuring it or waiting for something. I quickly grabbed my coat and purse, whispered a soft goodbye to Basil, and turned to him. Samael extended his arm, still standing just out of reach, his gaze fixed on the doorway with an intensity I couldn't read. "It's a pleasure to meet you in person, Maddie," he said, pressing a kiss to my hand. The restaurant he chose was even more impressive than he'd promised. Gold accents and deep reds made the space feel both regal and intimate. He mentioned it had been commissioned by some prince whose name I didn't recognize, from a country I couldn't place. I barely noticed my meal, enchanted by Samael himself. His voice carried a slight accent, and the way he spoke of his travels made every story feel alive. Most importantly, he seemed genuinely interested in me. This attractive stranger so charmed her that subsequent events did not cause her any concern. "Maddie is a beautiful name," he confessed with a crooked smile, and I managed to spill a little wine in my embarrassment. Then he produced a small, ornate box and opened it to reveal a delicate gold necklace. "I hope this isn't too forward," he said. "It's a small gift, a token to match your beauty." I felt warmth rush through me as he fastened the short, substantial chain around my neck. It hugged my collarbone snugly, impossible to remove over my head, and the gold felt solid against my skin. The rest of the dinner passed with him, sharing adventures from distant lands, while I told him about my modest, quiet life. By the end of the meal, exhaustion had taken over. I could barely keep my eyes open. Samael noticed and carried me gently to his car. "I'll get you home," he murmured. "You need rest." I remember only fragments as he returned me to my apartment and tucked me into bed. Through the haze, I thought I heard him murmur a chant or prayer. The lights flickered and went out. I drifted in and out of sleep, but there was another sound that made my heart race, a low, hissing noise. That wasn't Basil. I convinced myself I was dreaming and finally let myself fall asleep. I woke late the next morning, groggy and trying to reconstruct the night. The necklace still rested around my neck. When I tried to remove it to put it in my jewelry box, I realized it had no clasp. The chain was too short to slip over my head, yet There it was, resting perfectly. My head throbbed as I tried to make sense of it. Coffee and a call to Grace were my next steps. While the pot brewed, I approached Basil's enclosure to greet him. My ball python usually greeted me with gentle curiosity, coiling slowly around the branches and letting me stroke his smooth, patterned scales. He'd always been calm, content to rest in my hands or slither lazily along my arms. He was a gentle companion, never prone to aggression. Today, though, something was off. His tongue flicked rapidly, tasting the air with a sharp urgency, and his usually relaxed coils twitched nervously. Then, with no warning, he lunged forward, sinking his fangs into my finger, a behavior he had never shown before. Basil recoiled immediately, hissing softly as if startled himself, his eyes bright and alert. Confused and shaken, I wrapped my hand in a cloth and hoped the coffee would help calm my racing heart. Once I was able, I called Grace and recounted the night. I told her about the dinner, the strange necklace, and how Samael had carried me to bed while whispering that eerie phrase. I described the unsettling hissing I heard that night and Basil's unusual aggression the next morning. Finally, I admitted my frustration and confusion over the necklace, still unable to figure out how he had managed to place it on me. "Maddie, this doesn't sound right," Grace said, her voice tense. "I have a really bad feeling about this." "What do you mean? It's just a necklace. I'll probably just have to take it to a jeweler." I laughed nervously. "No, it's more than that," she said. "We need to check into his background. It'll make me feel better, and then we can laugh about it." But they could not imagine who this entity really was and what the woman agreed to by wearing the necklace. "I never got his last name," I admitted. "Maybe we can look him up by first name. It's not very common." "You must be joking," she scolded. "Samuel is extremely common." "Not Samuel," I corrected. "It's Samael." A shiver ran down my neck. The gold chain felt impossibly tight, almost alive against my skin. It seems to heat up and burn me when I try to get it off. Grace is on her way over to help me figure out what to do. I'm hoping that together we can uncover something, anything about Samael that might explain what's happening. He said he'd come by today to check on me, and just thinking about it makes my stomach twist into knots. I can't stop imagining what he might do or how he might have changed overnight. Every creak in the apartment makes me jump, and I can't tell if I'm being paranoid or if there's really something sinister waiting for me. And I hear the hissing getting louder and louder, and it's not Basil doing it. I finally remember one of the phrases he said to me when I passed out.
"Thank you for accepting my gift."
"Now I can come into your house without an invitation. Now you serve me." The following story is about a date that will definitely make you want to delete your dating apps. I should have left when she was late. A while back, I had one of the most unsettling experiences of my life. For context, online dating has never really been my thing, but after ending a long-term relationship, I thought it was worth a shot. I ended up matching with an attractive woman I'll call Rose. We hit it off through messages and eventually agreed to meet somewhere near her place, about an hour's drive from mine. Parking took forever, and by the time I arrived, I was already bracing for an awkward apology. Instead, I discovered that Rose was nowhere to be seen. My calls and texts went completely unanswered for the next 10 minutes, leading me to conclude I'd been stood up. Frustrating, but hardly unprecedented. Just as I turned to leave, she came around the corner looking absolutely stunning. Her appearance was enough to make me instantly forgive the poor communication. She explained that a friend had needed urgent support and she'd had to step in. Fair enough. The date itself went smoothly. Rose was charming and easy to talk to. One moment of awkwardness came up when she mentioned wanting to find a father figure for her young son. I politely explained that I wasn't in the right place in my life for that kind of responsibility. She brushed it off with a laugh, insisting I'd surprise myself. I changed the subject and we moved on. By 11 o'clock, tiredness got the better of me, and I said my goodbyes. When I reached my car, I stopped cold. The headlights had been smashed in, the tires were slashed, and a window was shattered. Strangely, nothing had been taken. It looked purely like an act of rage. Just as I was pulling out my phone to call for assistance, I heard my name being called. Incredibly, Rose happened to be driving past at that exact moment. She pulled into the lot, surveyed the damage, and suggested I come back to her apartment to wait while things got sorted out. The situation looks rather suspicious and seems to have been planned in advance. But by whom? And for what purpose? I was hesitant, but after checking rideshare prices and hearing her argue that the service in the area was unreliable, I agreed. I arranged for the car to be towed and we left together. Her apartment was immaculate, not a single item out of place, not a trace of dust anywhere. When she switched on the television, it was already open to a streaming service and a bowl of snacks sat neatly on the coffee table. It felt prepared rather than spontaneous. What struck me as odd was the complete absence of a babysitter. When I asked, she laughed and said her son was perfectly fine on his own and that she didn't trust strangers in her home. Strange, but I kept my thoughts to myself. Before we chose something to watch, she asked if I'd like to meet him. My inner answer was a firm no, but given the circumstances, I agreed with the least convincing enthusiasm I've ever mustered. She disappeared briefly, returning with what appeared to be a small bundle wrapped in a blanket, whispering to it affectionately.
"Come closer, don't be scared."
She invited me to come over and say hello. I leaned in and pulled back the blanket and immediately recoiled. Looking back at me was an ancient, crumbling porcelain doll. One eye had rolled back. A large cockroach had settled into its cracked open mouth, and its once white surface was darkened and fractured all over. I genuinely thought it was some kind of twisted joke. But Rose's expression was one of pure, sincere tenderness. She held it exactly as a mother holds a newborn, and the gentle kisses she gave it made clear this wasn't a performance. She asked me if I thought he was beautiful. I couldn't speak. I mumbled something about needing the bathroom and made my way down the hallway. He'd be better off not pretending everything's fine. After all, a mother is looking for a good father for her brood. Once inside, I locked the door and ran cold water over my face, trying to process what was happening. Then I heard a soft, persistent sound, something like crying. I opened the door slightly. Nobody was there. I followed the noise to a walk-in closet. Inside, what I'd assumed was a training mannequin torso suddenly snapped its head toward me, gasped, and screamed for help. I didn't wait. I bolted down the hallway, shoved past Rose, and ran into the street until my legs gave out. The last thing I heard was her voice behind me, begging me to come back. I called the authorities as soon as I got home. The following day, I was told they found nothing, just a woman living alone, no child, no one in the closet. Days later, my phone rang. It was Rose. She told me our son had spoken his first word, my name. A postcard arrived shortly after, mentioning plans to find a daycare closer to where I live, a location I had never shared with her. If you're using dating apps, please be careful. Some connections are not so easy to leave behind. It was Mr. Strawman, and remember, some stories follow you home.